Welcome to the PLC Professor's workshop and lab where we develop all of our hands-on projects with hardware. Now today's lecture is going to be not on hardware, but it's going to be on the 500 Emulate, the software that emulates the processors and or controllers that are supported by RSLogix 500. Now, specifically, we're going to work with those that are supported by Micro Starter, and even more specifically, Micro Starter Lite. Micro Starter Lite is free software, and if you can't find a link to download it, you can always contact Rockwell Automation technical support and tell them you need a link to download the software Micro Starter Lite, 500 Emulate, in RSLogix. You need those three pieces of software. Now, I provide those to the learners in my classes on a disk or on a jump drive. So I can't provide that if you happen to be registered for one of the classes. Nonetheless, what we're going to talk about right now is basically what is 500 Emulate. The big question is going to be, what is RSLogix Emulate 500? There's three pieces of software needed to create this simulator. You need RSLogix Micro Lite, that's the programming software, and then you need something to connect it to a PLC, or in this case to the Emulate software, and that software is called RSLogix. So RSLogix Emulate 500 is a application that emulates processors that can be supported or programmed with RSLogix 500. In this case, it's only going to be the Micrologix 1000 or 1100. Here's your, we'll call it your computer scape. You have two computers. You have a desktop or laptop, we'll call it the PC, and you have a PLC. Now this is without using Emulate. This is the standard conventional way to learn to program a PLC. You need a computer to run RSLogix 500 and RSLogix on, and then you need a PLC to download to that has some switches on it that you can flip and exercise your program. You see two pieces of RAM here. In the PC, the RAM is kept alive by the power from the power supply. In the PLC, it might have flash RAM, it might have double EEPROM, most likely it's battery back. The first thing you do in your laptop is you load RSLogix. RSLogix is a driver manager, very similar to a printer driver manager in your laptop or desktop. And most of us probably have Microsoft Office, or we have OpenOffice. Either way, we have a word processor, and we have a spreadsheet, we might have a publisher. When we create documents and we want to print them, we may have to print them on different printers. I have two different printers, actually three different printers in the house, and each printer requires a different format for the data coming from the Windows software, whether it's OpenOffice or Microsoft Office. The printer itself has unique requirements for the form that the data arrives at the printer. Hopefully, when you print a document from Microsoft Word to 7 different printers, all 7 of those printers print out identical documents, ignoring quality of print or vividness of the ink, but the basic document should look identical. However, each of those printers requires its own unique driver, and the driver fits between the application in Windows and between the device out there, in this case the printer. RSLogix is a driver manager. The first thing you make note of on your PLC is what serial ports are available on that PLC. Most PLCs have 2 serial ports, probably RS-232 and Ethernet. In the case of Allen Bradley, it's going to have RS-232 and DH45 or DH Plus or Ethernet. Some of the newer processors, it's going to be RS-232 and or Ethernet. Your computer, of course, is going to have more communication ports. Your
computer's probably going to have RS-232 Ethernet and USB. Not all computers have RS-232 now. Most computer manufacturers ask, well, what in the world would you need an RS-232 port for? Well, if you're programming PLCs, it's handy to have one. If you don't have RS-232, you can come up with a RS-232 to USB adapter. Those are available from $10 to $30. And then you use a regular RS-232 cable from the USB adapter to the 232 port on the PLC. We have RSLinx open. Now, when we open up RSLinx, the first thing you have to do is configure a driver because RSLinx all by itself has no drivers until you configure them. Here's a list, a current list of drivers available in RSLinx. Now, these drivers are all aimed at the port on the computer, not on the actual device out there. You see they mention here PLC 5, SLC 500, SmartGuard, and you see a couple PLC types mentioned. But these drivers are not drivers for those PLCs. They're for the COM ports on your computer. In other words, the COM port on your computer connects to the device out there by a cable. So by the time the information gets to the COM port on your computer, it better be in the right format to go across the cable and out to the actual device. So it just so happens that I had a driver highlighted here from something I was doing a little earlier. That's the driver you're going to end up using when you start working with the RSLogix Emulate 500. But for now, since we're talking about working with an actual hardware PLC, you would probably pick an Ethernet driver, either Ethernet devices or Ethernet IP. The difference between those two is that an Ethernet devices driver doesn't browse and look for IP addresses. You have to specify each IP address in the Ethernet devices driver. But the Ethernet IP driver is designed to allow you to browse a local subnet. So let's just say we're going to set up an Ethernet devices driver. Notice that all of these listed here are aimed at the device that's going to connect you to the actual equipment out in the field. We now have a driver in RSLinx, and we'll just assume it was Ethernet, so we plug in an Ethernet cable. We have RSLinx, we have a driver, we have a cable. So we have a means to communicate from the PC to the PLC. We have a driver that can manipulate the data from any other application, whether it's Excel or RSLogix 500. This RSLinx app will connect the software to the communications port on the PC. A cable connects that to the communications port on the PLC. So at this point we open up RSLogix, and in RSLogix we either open an existing project or we create a project. Once we have a project created, the next step is to take this project, and I've opened up RSLogix 500 here. Actually it's RSLogix Micro Starter Lite, which is what you'll be using with a simulator. And if you look at this software, I have a little program there of no means, but over to the left in the project view, you see the main folder is project, and under that is help, controller, program files, and data files. Now there's more files than that, but for the sake of our presentation here, the ones that we're concerned about are controller, program files, and data files. In program files, you'll see there's System 0, System 1, and Ladder 2. And I go through in depth in the manuals and in the lectures that go with the manuals explaining all these different files. But remember that we know that this PLC out there is a Micrologix 1000 because it's a piece of hardware. It has permanently embedded on the circuit board firmware that defines it as a Micrologix 1000. So the PLC already knows who it is. It just does not have any instructions. We create this project that you see in front of you, and the project primarily for the PLC is data files and program files, plus some I/O configuration and other things under the controller folder. We're going to take that project and we're going to send it through the RSLinx driver and then out to the PLC. So now the project exists in two locations. Actually probably three. There's probably a backup on the hard drive. Project is open in RAM in your personal computer, and it's now downloaded out to the PLC. However, what's in the PLC is not ladder logic, it is machine level language. So what got downloaded was a series of ones and zeros, just binary values, but it's in the form that a microprocessor understands. Always keep in mind that most of this software, like RSLogix, RSLinx, RSLogix Emulate, they are written in a higher level language, and it has a man interface or man readable graphical user interface. And so it's presented to you in graphic form that you understand. But once it's compiled and then goes through the RSLinx driver and goes out to the PLC, it's a whole different story. Right here we have the typical scenario, RSLogix 500 connected to a PLC by RSLinx. Remember, RSLinx is in the PC. It's not in the communications port, but it sets between RSLogix and the communications port. In the case of RSLogix Emulate 500, you're going to open up that software, and once it's in memory, basically that Emulate software replaces the PLC out there in the field. But the Emulate software is not a piece of hardware, so it is not manufactured as a Micrologix 1000 or a Micrologix 1100 or 1200 or 1400 or 1500. It's not manufactured as a SLC 500, a SLC 501, 502, 503, 504, 505. I think you get the point. It's just an open frame, so you have to define it. The simplest way to define it is to create a very simple project in RSLogix Micro Starter Lite with just the processor and the I/O configured. If it's a Micrologix 1000, the I/O is fixed, so you don't have to configure any I/O. So you create a basic project, name it, and then save it. Once it's saved, then in Emulate software, RSLogix Emulate 500, you can open a folder, and when you do that, you're going to go look on your hard drive and find the file that you saved from RSLogix 500 or RSLogix Micro Starter Lite. You're going to open that, and that will be brought into the Emulate, and now the Emulate becomes a PLC. Keep this in mind. A PLC, Programmable Logic Controller, has a microprocessor and it has RAM. Your personal computer has a microprocessor and it has RAM. The microprocessor in your personal computer now becomes the PLC's microprocessor, and a portion of the RAM in your personal computer is now replacing the RAM that was in the PLC. This little framework down there called Emulate, once it knows who it is, in other words, I'm a Micrologix 1000, that's sufficient. Now it's something that you can connect to from links. You can't go through RSLinx out through a cable out to something that doesn't know what it is, because it can't talk back. When you set up the driver with RSLinx, it sends out information. If it gets nothing back, it says, hey, there's nothing out there. So now you're going to connect up to the Emulate frame in your personal computer's RAM with RSLinx. So you open up RSLogix Microlite, you bring in a project, and at this point, this looks exactly like what you would have out in the field if you had a laptop with RSLogix open and RSLinx open, a driver configured, there was an actual PLC in a machine. You have yet to connect to that PLC. Even if you hook up a cable until you actually go online or download or do something, you're not connected to that PLC. In this case with Emulate, because the Emulate framework is now defined and has an address or a location number 0 through 31, you can open up RSLogix, you can do communications, who active, and when you open up the browser, it will find the Emulate framework because it's made to appear now like it is a device out there on a network, and then you just go online with it. Once you're online with it, you can download a project from RSLogix into the Emulate, and you can upload from the Emulate into RSLogix. However, Micrologix 1000 does not support online programming, and in the case of RSLogix Emulate 500, it does not support online programming anyway. So the only real difference between a PLC that you might have had out there to connect up to and Emulate is you will have to do all of your editing offline.
Well, that gave you an intimate look at the emulator. And remember that the emulator is a class of objects. And when you open it, you are creating an instance. You are configuring that instance with a few values, like for the address, if you want to call it the communications address, but it is a empty shell, so to speak. It's a piece of plastic with no personality. Then you open the file for a particular model of a controller processor. and then it became an actual complete emulator for a Micrologix 1000 or 1100. So this kind of covered the basis of what is the emulator. What it doesn't do is get you the software. I just went and looked, and on today's date, I can go into the Rockwell Automation website and download free 500 Emulate. I can download the emulator for RSLogix 500. So that is still available to download free from Rockwell website, as well as RSLinks. What I could not find was a link to download Micro Starter Lite, which is free. Micro Starter, you can buy that license from your local distributor for under $200. And that's not a bad investment because it will support all the Micrologix, 1000, 1100, 1200, 1400, and 1500. So it's not a waste of money. However, I do provide at no additional cost with certain of the manuals on my website a disk or an electronic format of Micro Starter Lite. I'm not selling the software. I don't sell software. But I do provide students in my classes with Micro Starter Lite on an electronic format. That's going to conclude this lecture, but we're going to then do another one here shortly that talks about using the emulator and some of the things that you can do to make it easier to use it. So thank you for watching.